Hello and welcome back. Before we get to part 2, Real Talk, please allow us to fulfill our capitalistic duty and plug our Patreon, the Contrarian Supplements.
That's right. For a small fee, you too can help the Contrarians rage on.
We have tiers ranging from just $1 to $10. It all depends on how much content you can handle.
Starting at $1, it's a Travoltis tier, which gets you access to new bonus episodes focusing on a new movie every month, as well as access to the patron chat. Join other patrons in making fun of our opinions.
Moving up to $3 is the Winonis tier, which unlocks access to our pre-recording notes, our video reviews, and our spin-off show, Contrarians After Hours.
That's a more laid-back space where we talk about other things we've been watching, reading, playing, thinking about. Sometimes it's related to the movies being covered in the main feed, but it usually isn't.
If you want to be part of those patrons who help us shape the show by telling us which movies to tackle, that's when you sign up for the $5 tier, the Embries, and the $10, the Gads.
Finally, all supplement subscribers, regardless of the tier, get access to our archive of special patron projects. Head over to patreon.com/contrarianprime now to join.
Be sure to listen through the end of the episode to find out what's coming up to the Contrarian Supplements this month. Now, it's time for some Real Talk.
All right, I'm coming out. Any man I see out there, I'm gonna kill him. Any some bitch takes a shot at me, not only gonna kill him, I'm gonna kill his wife, all his friends, burn his damn house down. Nobody better shoot.
All right, Julio. I managed to get back on the horse. I struggled numerous times, much like Clint Eastwood in this, but I recovered without breaking my nose, which I think is what happened to him in one point of this. Did you catch that? It's because he hadn't been out in the field in a long time, so he couldn't get back on the horse.
I didn't catch it, but thankfully he told me several times during the movie.
We are back for Real Talk for Unforgiven, the Academy Award-winning Best Picture. Hell of a film. Directed by Clint Eastwood, written by David Webb Peoples, produced by Clint Eastwood, Gene Hackman, Morgan Freeman, Richard Harris. Release date of August 7th of 1992. Had a budget of a bit over $14 million with a box office return of close to $160 million. So did quite well for itself. And of course was a massive awards darling, which we'll get to here momentarily. Curious your thoughts on this movie, Julio, just given, our minor history with Westerns and, your varying opinions on them. So I propose we go ahead and get to the bad, the ugly, the green splotches. The 4% on Rotten Tomatoes that were not as smitten with this movie as apparently the rest of the world. What were the complaints? What's the beef?
These people either don't like Westerns, they don't like Eastwood, or maybe both. We're going to start with Ralph Novak from People magazine, who says, while Eastwood dedicates the film to Sergio Leone and Don Siegel, his early directors, he doesn't seem to have learned all that much from them. Ouch. I did catch that at the end. It's like for Sergio and Don. Mm-hmm. Did you see that? Yeah. It's Eastwood getting sentimental at the very end. I wonder, I don't know if Leone and Siegel were alive when Unforgiven came out. But if they were, I wonder how they would have felt about it. Like, don't put my name on the shit.
They're like, Clint Eastwood, he's overrated.
They do that. Or that it comes up at the end of the credits, like for Sergio and Don, and they both do the jerk off motion. It's like, whatever, Clint. Next, Gene Siskel from the Chicago Tribune says individual scenes work, but the movie seems overstuffed and halting. It's hooey. It's hooey, Roger.
Apparently.
Overstuffed hooey. And then finally, Jonathan Rosenbaum from the Chicago Reader says there's not much dramatic urgency apart from the revisionist context. That's, I think, the second time that the word revisionist has come up this episode. I get it. And actually, I mean, it wasn't planned this way. But to have this so soon after our Saving Private Ryan episode, like I said in Trans Corner, it does feel a little bit like serendipitous.
Contrarian's clairvoyance.
Yeah, right? Because we spent a good amount of that episode talking about what Spielberg did for the war genre, or what he did to the war genre. And I think you could say that Eastwood does something similar to the Western genre. So when you talk about revisionist to the genre, are you talking about updating the tropes, like taking some of those elements and kind of revising them for a modern audience? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, obviously, if the purpose of your movie is only to give me a modern take on the tropes, but the story itself is not that interesting, then is it really a good movie? Or is it just a novelty of showing me, oh, look, the thing that we're making fun of in Trans Corner, right? Like, you could say this is a very plain story, but because it's old Clint Eastwood playing an aged version of the characters that he used to play back when he was doing spaghetti westerns, then it's special. But really, you remove that gimmick, and is there really anything to Unforgiven, right? And you just apply that to every single thing that is just like a Western, but a little grittier. And I remember I was in film school and Unforgiven came up, and the teacher that was talking about it was like, it's awesome because it's like it's a Western, but the way that the Old West really used to be, right? And so you don't see they walk into this brothel and it's not like the women are super attractive, right? They look like beaten up by life. And I was watching the movie, a couple days ago, and I was like, what was he talking about? Perfect teeth. Like even the woman that gets disfigured by the early villain, she still looks kind of great by the time that she's propositioning Eastwood. So it is still kind of a Hollywood version of whatever the Old West was supposed to be. It's just that it's, I guess, grittier. But we can start there, Alex, because that was the last quote, right? Do you think that the main merit of this movie is that it just does those updates to the genre? It just takes the things that we know of Westerns, of old Westerns, and basically puts the grim and gritty coat of paint on them. But everything else is just kind of a generic Old West story.
I mean, it's a gorgeous movie. That's to me one of its successes, and I could see the members of the Academy in 1992 watching this and be like, "Oh, yes, split diopter. Oh, long establishing shots. Yes." I wanted to capitalize real quick or piggyback on the Gene Siskel here. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert criticized the work, though Ebert did give it a positive vote for being too long and having too many superfluous characters, citing Harris's English Bob, who enters and leaves without meeting the protagonist.
Wow.
Which is true.
It's just what we were talking about in the previous section.
Ebert eventually included it in his great movies list.
The fact that Unforgiven is in my top 10, Gene, requires, I guess, some explanation. I gave a thumbs up on our show, but I didn't react to it as best film of the year material, maybe because I was somewhat distracted by viewing it on the eve of my approaching matrimony. My attention was elsewhere. Last week I looked at the movie again with a somewhat better focus, and I realized fully what a good movie it is, how well acted and directed, and especially how well written by David Webb Peoples, who has some dialogue here that deserves comparison with Hemingway.
So, yeah, I mean, it's like for the time, a modern take on the Western. It's good. This isn't a movie, jump into the end here. This is not a 5-star movie. This is not an A+ movie for me, at least. It really, to me, even watching it now, it feels like the Clint Eastwood show, which it is. And it was a thing that kind of bounced him back into being, fucking Clint Eastwood. So I get that part of it, but you watch it just on its own merit, and it doesn't do anything really progressive or revelatory with the genre. You know what I mean? It's a pretty paint by numbers made with the technology of 1992 and implementing a bit more of the ideology. Well, that's not true, because it's not like a John Wayne movie in the sense of there's not like a clear hero. It does do a good job of injecting a bit of moral strife or conflict into it. But just as the presentation goes, and at the end of the day, an average viewer could interpret this as Clint Eastwood is the good guy. You know what I mean? Even though they say repeatedly he's not, just the hero complex is kind of there. Does any of what I just said make sense?
No, absolutely. And I
felt like I was rambling for 5 minutes.
No, and I've had a struggle with Unforgiven, a good struggle. I think it's a good movie, but I've always have trouble getting on the same level as the people that absolutely love it. And it'd been a while since I watched it. Like I watched it, not when it came out, but sometime after they praised it in film school, sometime in the late 90s probably, right? And then I probably watched it once more since then, and then not again until just this last week. But every time I wasn't getting like the depth of it. And I think the people that love it will tell you that this movie, on top of everything else that it does well, it also says a lot about violence. And that's the part that even now I just still can't get. And I think it has to do with what you're saying a little bit. That feeling that, look, in the end, he may have been a monster in a past life, but in this movie, he's a pretty okay dude. He has friends, he's civilized, and he kills the people that were worse than him. Like he kills the real bad guys. And so it's not like that much of a moral quandary to get behind and root for him. Maybe it's supposed to be, but I don't really feel it. And maybe that's part of it. I'll tell you the big takeaway for me this time more than the others. And that is that I feel that by being so gritty and so unflinching in its depiction of violence and just the messiness of this Old West, at least, that I think it's what it does, what it enhances, what it does to enhance the genre. That it, in Westerns of yesteryear, it was just fun and games, right? And you didn't really think about the consequences of shooting a man and of living in this set of circumstances where kind of like everything go, where like a guy like Little Bill can just run the town and power trip and just do whatever he wants. It's the Saving Private Ryan thing again, right? Like the old war movies were fun, and then Saving Private Ryan came in, and it's like, oh yeah, but it's really not that fun when you think of how it applies to the real world. And then the same thing here. All Westerns are just fun adventures, and here it's just, okay, but what if we really show you what happens to Morgan Freeman, right? Then it's not that fun. And I think that alone justifies its existence. But where it falls short, I guess, is that I don't really feel too strongly about it. Not the way that keep going back to Saving Private Ryan because it's just so fresh in my mind. We just did it, right? And even after the conversation, I've been editing the episode, so it's all in my head. But when Saving Private Ryan is over, it redefined the war genre, but it also told me a story that left me shaken, and I really connected to those characters. And here, I feel really bad for Morgan Freeman. I was like, man, that sucks that they caught him and they broke him, and then they displayed his corpse. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't have a reaction to it, but I am not deeply moved by the outcome of William Mooney's story. I was like, all right, he went back to his kids. He moved to San Francisco. I don't know what I'm supposed to make of it. What do you make of it? What do you make of the ending? You were kind of hinting at it when we were closing up Contrarian's Corner.
That's the part where I think the movie is supposed to express just the idea of like, this is what life was like in the Old West, and not necessarily the John Wayne mentality of like, yay, he killed the Indians, or, yay, the train, he saved everybody. It's it felt like, yeah, people like this existed, and then they went back home, and if an opportunity came up, they would just pack up shop and leave their house behind. And, I think there's something too to the idea of his wife being, his wife being buried there. And there's the shot of him, like, kind of visiting and paying respects to her grave, and just left that there and left everything behind. Just the idea of like, you would kill to survive. And then, you never really had a home. You were just kind of always on the run, as was the style at the time, I guess. That's what it felt like to me. It was trying to paint a picture of what life used to be versus the idea of we have someone to cheer for. You know, it wasn't Superman. It wasn't like another Gene Hackman movie. I mean, yes. Gene Hackman, I even have a hard time calling him the bad guy in this, because just like from personal experience growing up around a lot of local government and seeing particularly sheriffs, I think there's just a lot of people that take that role extremely seriously, and it goes to their head and they're very loud about it. And, you know, this is my town, this is my jurisdiction, all that shit. So yeah, he's a fucking bully in this, but I can just kind of see it. Like it makes sense to me. Like he's just this dickhead who got this position and wants to preserve his town. So I'm not trying to say he's a good guy or his actions to be excused, but my point is just circling back to what we were talking about. I don't find necessarily the traditional good and evil in this movie as you typically find in older Westerns and just movies in general. You usually got to have someone to cheer for and someone to, you know, boo. And here we have a protagonist and an antagonist, but I think it's different than that. I can't imagine. I can, but you know, I can't imagine someone intelligent watching this and like cheering when Clint Eastwood kills Gene Hackman.
I don't know, man. I mean, it's why wouldn't you cheer? That's my counterpoint. Gene Hackman is, I think at the moment, look, it is just a movie manipulating us, obviously, right? But if you somehow thought that Gene Hackman was kind of on the right side, or at least had a case, right? It's his town and he's just trying to keep the peace and whatever. But the way that he treats Morgan Freeman is...
Yes. The Morgan Freeman dynamic changes everything.
And Ned, them whores are going to tell different lies than you. And when their lies ain't the same as your lies, well, I ain't going to hurt no woman. But I'm going to hurt you. Not gentle like before, but bad.
Right. So that's why I'm okay. I mean, it's ugly, but I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that it's not a fist pump moment for me when Clint Eastwood just decimates everybody in that bar. Because it's like, that's where we were going.
Yeah, that's awesome, because that's like Neo shit, man.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't have any sympathy for Hackman. I'm going to be harder on him. I think he gets off on being cruel. I mean, I think you're right. He's a bully, and he probably wasn't like this from the beginning, but it got to his head, and, you know, power corrupts, all that. How much of him beating up English Bob is practicality of making a point, but also him getting off on just inflicting pain on this guy. So I think that he is a real piece of shit, not just a local official that maybe got a little too high, you know, too far up his own ass.
He's building a house, though.
Yes, that's supposed to humanize him.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not discounting what the movie does, because it really is. I think that there is a complexity to his character, and to Eastwood's character, and to the sidekick character, to Morgan Freeman's. There's a complexity that you probably don't find in early Westerns. I've watched very few of them, so I really can't, you know, generalize and tell you for sure, but it feels to me like that. There is something to I think you get to see more into the psychology of the Gene Hackman character and the psychology of the Clint Eastwood character, and why they do what they do, and why they think they're right. What are their regrets? Definitely Eastwood's regrets, right? That is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. I mean, that is in the end, there is still like Eastwood is the guy that you are rooting for, even if you are horrified by him shooting Gene Hackman at the very end. It was still what we wanted to happen. And I just wanted like that little extra push where maybe I don't know who I'm rooting for, right?
Yeah.
You know, where I think that Eastwood is out of control. Maybe he is that monster that we've been told about. And so I can see Hackman's point. I can see his point of view saying, oh, well, he needs to stop him because Eastwood is a danger to this town. Right. But that's not, you know, this movie's a lot simpler, even though it adds a lot of complexity. So I think that I'm missing that a little bit. It's still very entertaining to watch. assuming that you're not squeamish about the violence. It's a pretty straightforward, very engaging story. It's kind of like half of it is a road trip. Just Freeman, Eastwood, and the Schofield kid riding their horses on a quest.
I did want more Morgan Freeman. I was kind of joking about that in Contrarian's Corner, but like, I just felt like there was more we could have learned, or felt like there was more backstory there than was given. And to be fair, that's I sometimes like that when it's not spoon fed to you. I talk about that all the time. Like, just introduce this character and don't explain their backstory and leave it up to the viewer's interpretation, like that type of shit. But I just like Morgan Freeman. I was like, oh man,
he's great.
Where did he come from? What did he do before this? How did he meet his wife? Let's see him fucking.
Right? We almost did. We see the aftermath every time. He's my favorite, I think, or at least he was a surprise for me watching it now, because I knew exactly what I was in for when it came to the Eastwood performance, and I remembered enough of the Hackman performance that I was like, oh, those were pretty vivid in my mind. But there was just some, it's not just the likability of the Freeman character, but also I think that he comes across as the most natural out of all the performers. You know, they're a little theatrical in the way that they deliver the lines, like Eastwood, Hackman, some of the other actors, which is fine. It works. I'm assuming that it's just a choice because of the genre, maybe. But, you know, the way that these people talk is just kind of, that's not how people talk. but I think that Freeman, out of everybody, Morgan Freeman makes it sound like, no, that is how people talk.
Yeah.
That's very welcome. I think that the moment that he's introduced, it really feels like there's a warmth to the movie that was not there before. And that's pretty genius, because of course that's why it hurts so much when he finally dies, when he's out of the movie. I was not kidding, Contrarian's Corner. I was not expecting the lust, the sexual activities to be part of his character, because that's not really what I associate when I think what I associate with Morgan Freeman.
Had no porn or internet back in the day, man. You know, you got to do what you got to do.
I know, but again, it's a respected senior citizen actor, Morgan Freeman.
Gene Hackman, tremendous. Gene Hackman, not telling tales at recess here. A great actor, and even, you know, the mixed emotions I'm trying to process with his character. He's great in this. He's a dickhead.
Yeah,
but like, the scenes where he's talking to Beauchamp and telling those stories, and he starts to get kind of excited about telling the stories and, you know, kind of educating someone on the art of the duel and pulling a gun and stuff. It's a layered performance for sure.
So he's full of shit though, right? Like, that's what the movie's telling you by the end, when Beauchamp is trying to break down how is it that Clint Eastwood killed everybody at the bar. He's like, oh, you shot this guy first, and then you shot this guy. He's trying to apply the logic that Hackman was spouting when he was talking to him. And Eastwood's like, no, I just got lucky. I shot the guy that I shot, and that's how it all played out. And it's a complete opposite of how Hackman was saying that a normal duel or a shootout would go.
Yeah, and that's why it makes that scene so much more like satisfying is definitely the wrong word, but interesting in retrospect, because he's just doing exactly what Harris had done, you know, just making up bullshit and feeding him these lies because he wants his story told, you know?
Yeah, he's really good. I'm sure we'll get into who was nominated alongside him, but that's a good win. I mean, that is maybe an expected win, but it's well deserved. I'm glad that he got that recognition. But I got to tell you, I am surprised that Freeman didn't get it. I was not kidding, Contrarian's Corner. I am surprised that the Academy wouldn't even give him a nomination. It's Renée Zellweger all over again.
So now we go to the 1993 Academy Awards, hosted by who, Julio?
Oh, that's Billy Crystal. That's Billy Crystal territory.
Got that right.
Unforgiven, that's what you are. You killed everyone, 'cause you're the star. Come here, you big mayor, you.
In the category of Best Picture, Unforgiven took it home. Also nominated was The Crying Game, A Few Good Men, Howard's End, Scent of a Woman. Best Director went to Clint Eastwood for Unforgiven. Also nominated was Neil Jordan for The Crying Game, James Ivory for Howard's End, another contrarian entry here, Robert Altman for The Player, and Martin Brest for Scent of a Woman.
So Reiner shot out of the director's category.
Best Actor, again, I find it funny Clint Eastwood was nominated because he's just Clint Eastwood. But hey, that works for people sometimes. Jennifer Aniston's made a hell of a career off that. Clint Eastwood was nominated for Unforgiven as Will Money. Denzel Washington as Malcolm X in Malcolm X. Stephen Rea for The Crying Game as Fergus. One of your favorites, Julio, Robert Downey Jr. as Charlie Chaplin in Chaplin. And winner, do you care to take a guess?
92. Oh, it's Pacino for Scent of a Woman.
Hooah! Yep, that's right. Emma Thompson won Best Actress for Howard's End. Catherine Deneuve got a nomination also. There you go. Michelle Pfeiffer, Susan Sarandon, Mary McDonnell. Nice.
Did they at least invite Frances Fisher to the ceremony?
I would hope so.
Was she like Eastwood's +1?
She was Hackman's date. They were just like making out. Best Supporting Actor. We already mentioned Gene Hackman took this home for Unforgiven, but what was this competition looking like? You had Jay Davidson for The Crying Game, Old Jack for A Few Good Men, Al Pacino for Glengarry Glen Ross, and David Paymer for Mr. Saturday Night. Pacino is fucking awesome in Glengarry Glen Ross, so fair play. No actress nominations for this, so it couldn't take home the big four. Which,
do you think Frances Fisher submitted for your consideration?
Oh, of course. The previous year saw one of those famous big four sweeps, picture, director, actor, and actress, being with The Silence of the Lambs. And then the year after this, Spielberg pulled an Eastwood, took home picture and director for Schindler's List.
Ray Fiennes, Liam Neeson. Nope.
Get fucked. But anyway, back to Unforgiven. Best Screenplay, written directly for the screen, as they used to call the best original screenplay, went with The Crying Game, Neil Jordan. Husband and Wives, Woody Allen was nominated, as was Lorenzo's Oil, George Miller, Passion Fish, John Salas, and David Webb Peoples just sat in there, probably in the way back. Didn't pay for the front end tickets, so.
He went by himself. Again, he left Janet at home. Janet was watching the Oscars with Frances Fisher.
I complimented the score of this movie. Didn't even get a nomination. But you know what did? Basic Instinct. Aladdin won, of course, which would lead anyone to deduce correctly that A Whole New World won Best Original Song. Bram Stoker's Dracula won an Oscar for Best Sound Effects Editing. This was a popular year for the contrarians, you know?
Yeah.
Best Cinematography was nominated for as well. That went to A River Runs Through It.
That is wild. I mean, I haven't seen A River Runs Through It, but this movie looks amazing. I mean, you already sang its praises at the beginning, but still, I think I got so lost in the trying to figure out why it doesn't fully work for me that I might have undersold how great it is just on a technical level. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful to look at.
It did win Best Film Editing over A Few Good Men, The Crying Game, The Player, and Basic Instinct. God, and Best Visual Effects, Death Becomes Her beat out Alien 3 and Batman Returns. What a hell of a lineup. That brings the total of nominations of Unforgiven to 9, with they took home 4 Oscars, which was the leader that year. Bram Stoker's Dracula taking home 3, coming in second place. Yeah, it's a very, very gorgeous movie. And Clint Eastwood, one thing that I could never criticize the man for is establishing mood, and like his movies, they look and feel the way I believe he wants you to feel, and he wants them to look when you watch them. I don't know if that's true at all, but you know, some directors like to do like this avant-garde shit where it's like, oh, leave it up to, you know, the audience, or, this is how I want it to look. I don't care what other people think. But Clint Eastwood, like watching this movie, I could see him, like his mind, the gears turning of like, okay, He's looking through like the lens and he's like, this is how an audience member is going to feel when they see this part. I want to linger on this shot so they have time to process what just happened and shit. And he's very, very good at making things matter with presentation. That's Gran Torino. This is better than Gran Torino, but that's a movie that has that's a movie that lets things like mature and simmer and shit. And $1 Million Baby, even though I think that movie is not good on the whole, like I think about all the time, it's burned into my brain how well lit and just like presented the scene where he visits her in her hospital bed after she like bit her tongue off. Like just how dark it is. And that's the scene, I believe, where Morgan Freeman's like in the shadow watching him, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think of The Ring, like Morgan Freeman getting in the ring and knocking out Anthony Mackie.
I see that part. I don't remember.
Dude, it's the fist bump moment. It's like it's Gene Hackman getting shot.
Escape from Alcatraz. That was the movie I kept like. It was in the back of it was on the tip of my tongue. That I was wanting to reference. It's like a classic Clint Eastwood movie in the first half, and I kept forgetting about it. Anyway, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Well, it kind of does because it's something that I wrote down that I didn't get to reference because I couldn't like really bring it up in an organic way. Is this Eastwood's Birdman? Just because Michael Keaton and Birdman, right? You can read it as this sort of movie that tangentially is, if not autobiographical, then certainly you could read it as inspired by elements of his life. And that's part of the fun of it, that you're watching
The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke.
Yes, but Mickey Rourke didn't make a career out of playing wrestlers. Right. So I think that takes one layer
I'm sorry,
away.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Keaton had a history with playing Batman, and then Birdman is him playing a superhero, and people ask him to come back as that superhero. And this is Eastwood very much making a movie that works an extra level just because it's him playing this character, and this character is a version, an evolution of the characters that he's played before. So if this character is not played by Clint Eastwood, the movie loses something. Just the same way that if Birdman wasn't played by Michael Keaton, you lose that element, you lose that layer. And I'm not saying that it would be easy to replace Mickey Rourke in The Wrestler, but you could arguably, you could have an actual wrestler play that part. If you had a wrestler that could act, and then it would like really hit you.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is obviously something that has to have been there from the inception point, from the moment that they decided, somebody decided, I'm guessing it was Eastwood, I'm going to make this movie, and this movie is going to be anchored by not just my performance, but my persona, the perception that the audience has of me throughout the years. I'm this iconic Western actor.
Ned, you remember that drover I shot through the mouth and his teeth came out the back of his head? I think about him now and again. He didn't do anything to deserve to get shot. At least nothing I could remember when I sobered up.
All right, so where was he coming into this? Heartbreak Ridge, The Deadpool, Pink Cadillac, White Hunter, Black Heart.
Was he the first Deadpool?
The Rookie. Just him cussing and killing people. There's gonna be a cleanup on aisle 5, or something like whatever Ryan Reynolds says. But yeah, it had been a while since we had Western Eastwood.
Well,
and I think it's just one of those things of, he had plenty of directing work prior to this. It's just stars aligned, man. He directed Jesus. I'm looking at his credits right now. Probably close to 15 movies before this. He directed The Outlaw Josie Wales, and he went back to what brung him, being a badass action lead, but then figured out how to put that in the context of this movie that I don't think to the extent of like days after the fact, but it is one that makes you think of like, oh man, even if it's just something as simple as like, could I have survived in a time like that? Or, who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? Like that type of thing. So he took badass action Clint Eastwood, had a fucking hell of a screenwriter with him, mixed that together, made a film that was more than just a shoot 'em up style Western. And then you couple that in with legitimately You have a supporting cast of two of the greatest actors in the history of the medium, and Lachlan Monroe's in there, and then you have a pretty interesting story too. Just the idea of this bounty isn't even for something like this man burnt all my crops, or this man killed my brother. It's a really fucked up thing, but the townspeople are like, it ain't no biggie. It's a churched up action movie is what it is. It's got like a really fancy coat on, but it works. That's the thing. It's not one of those that it feels really transparent to me. We've talked about a lot of movies, the whole idea of like elevated horror, elevated action, those terms people want to use of
elevated Western.
Yeah, there you go. That's what's next, man. When Eastwood gets his A24 financing and makes a Western with them. But just what I'm to close on this point is like, it's easy to say that in retrospect, but I don't watch this movie and I'm not like, he's just, making a fucking action movie, but trying to make it seem like important. Like that shit comes across as like pretentious, when you try to do the fucking Only God Forgives. Yeah, you're trying to make like a stylized action movie, but have like some deep meaning to it, but it's coming off as like really like, smelling your own farts. With this, just like, man, this shit works.
Yeah, I think that also what it does, my whole film school teacher that I quoted earlier, he might have oversold it, but he does make it ugly in a way that I think those early Westerns didn't, right? That there might have been a sense.
I hate to pick on John Wayne. Oh wait, no, I don't. But you have not seen like any of the John Wayne classics, right?
Nope.
Okay, that's exactly what you're referring to. The just completely whitewashed, clear good guy, bad guy. The West is all
adventure,
guns, cigars, whiskey and women, like that. Adventure. There you go. Yeah, ride like the wind, bullseye.
Like the idea that anybody watching Unforgiven can't think, oh man, to have lived at that time, right? Must have been quite a thing. I watch Unforgiven and we're like, oh God, we've come such a long way. Even if this version of reality is still distorted and it probably wasn't, we know it's still a Hollywood version of it, but I think that's what it does. It's we were talking about how it was putting the coat of paint on it, but maybe what it does is really, it takes the paint off. It just shows you the ugly underside. And that's fine. I really, you mentioned the killing a man line, and to kill a man's a hell of a thing. And then it's in that same speech, that's when he says, we'll have it coming, right? Or it's coming for all of us. And that is something. I mean, maybe that is enough that he has a character in the movie express that sentiment. That's the statement about the Western, right? That it's the killing took a toll on these people, or should take a toll in these people. And it's all a hellhole, and the only way out is just escaping. I guess going over to San Francisco, where the fuck he goes at the end. That's the only way that you can survive, that your sanity can survive. The only way that you can secure safety for your family. No romance, no romantic view of the Old West. I mean, there is value to that. It's not just the gimmick. Just going back to the very beginning of this conversation, it's not just that, oh, well, it's just about it being revisionist and without saying anything. I think that maybe that is what it's saying about violence, right? That it's you can depict it as entertaining, or you can depict it as something that is like a vicious circle. And when you look at it that way, well, maybe it's not so much fun. I still wish that it just hit me harder.
Yeah, there's definitely Westerns that predate this that do a better job of establishing the harsh realities of the time, unlike the John Waynes. And I know
we did the Wild Bunch, and that was
Wild Bunch. Yeah.
Yeah, that one was a little harsher.
Rick Dalton, Bounty Law.
Rick fucking Dalton. He should have played the Scofield Kid.
But that was like in the early days of Disney. That was a fallback when the West, make it in the West. Show the fun times of the frontier. And I think movies like this in particular will make people reconsider the idea of what it took to survive in those times.
All right, so what these fellas do? Cheated cards? Steal some strays? Spit on a rich fella? What?
No, they cut up a woman.
What?
Yeah, cut up her face, cut her eyes out, cut her fingers off, cut her tits.
Do you think this affected the genre the way that Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan did, though? Can't step away from it, but it's just so close in the conversation.
I don't know about that.
I don't think so either, right?
We talked about 3:10 to Yuma earlier, and there's some like rough parts to that movie, but there is like an adventure aspect to that movie that is a bit lighter than, you know, some of the stuff we see here. Yeah, I don't know.
I also think that it didn't revive the genre in the way that some people predicted at the time, because I remember, you know, they do that every now and then. A big genre movie will make a big splash, and then people proclaim that genre is back for sure. Like they proclaimed that the musical is back. I don't know, 3 times, 4 times in my lifetime so far. And I remember that was the thing with Unforgiven, or like the Western is back, baby. And yeah, I mean, we still make Westerns, but
did Tombstone come out before or after this? Like that and Wyatt Earp, do you recall?
I think it's 93.
Okay. So I could see
Tombstone. Yeah, Tombstone is a bullshit Western. It's not Unforgiven.
I'm just trying to think of like the famous Westerns.
Just go down Kevin Costner's filmography.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand what you mean. And there's been attempts. The Coen brothers did that remake of True Grit. And
yeah.
I remember, I think it did well. Pretty sure it got a few Oscar nominations and financially did well. And you could consider Django perhaps a Western of sorts. And I think it's at this stage in 2024, those movies are just viewed more as a novelty. And I understand they're like the musical. There's something that absolutely fucking wrecked shop on box offices and, you know, just dominated the film culture for a period of time. But once they kind of faded away, it seemed like that's where they went. And so I can see in 1992, this movie comes out, makes, you know, over $150 million or whatever it was, and gets all these Oscar nominations. I could see people thinking the Western's back, but it feels like, I don't know if this sounds closed-minded of me, but it feels limiting, or it feels limited in today's world and in the 90s of so much had already been done with that genre. And the people that were going to movies and shit at that point in time, especially R-rated movies, were raised on Westerns and whatnot. So I could see there being fatigue with that genre really quick. I enjoyed, I think, a bit more than you do. That's why it takes a concept to really make a Western pop in modern time. The Bone Tomahawk, man. That was a different movie. I can comfortably say I've never really seen anything like that.
Did you ever watch the Magnificent Seven remake? Because I haven't. But
is that the one with like Chris Pratt in it?
Chris Pratt, Ethan Hawke. I think Ethan Hawke is a bad guy. Denzel might be in it. I think Antoine Fuqua is the director.
I still haven't seen The Hateful Eight.
Yeah, well, that's a Tarantino movie more than it's like anything else.
Well, I assumed as much, but yeah.
But the Magnificent Seven remake, I remember watching the trailer, and that is just an adventure movie. That's what it seems like. Fun times with a big cast. So that's unlike the war movie where, like, after Saving Private Ryan, they all had to be Saving Private Ryan. After Unforgiven, it's like they all had to be Unforgiven.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's supposed to be a good thing. It should be a good thing because we want variety. But also, it might just be that when something is not Unforgiven, we don't really care that much. I don't know. Western fans, hit us up. Tell us.
Yeah.
What's the deal with the genre you love, if you love it? Do you just go back to the oldies? Do you not even bother with the new stuff? Like Kevin Costner, his new passion project, it just bombed so bad that they...
Well, what's that show he's on? Because that's like a modern version of a Western.
Is it Yellowstone?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, he quit the show so he could make this movie. And the movie was a catastrophic bomb.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the show's still going. But I think that they wrote his character out. And this project, Horizon, is supposed to be a 4-part American saga. And so part 1 came out, bombed. Part 2 is already shot and had a release date, but they canceled that. And they're like, we're going to wait I think they're hoping that it does better on streaming, and then they'll release part 2, and then maybe they'll give him money to do part 3 and 4. But I mean, it's talking about like a 4-part feature film Western.
So he's basically like trying to do Lonesome Dove again.
I guess, but today with him at the center.
That's another of that time. I don't think it was. It might have been before Lonesome Dove. I know it was early 90s, late 80s when that aired, but that was definitely a very, very popular Western of the time. Winding down here, where do you sit on, I would say, one of the more modern, at least talked about interpretations of the Western being the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford?
I've never watched it all the way through.
Well, goddamn.
Every time I start it, I fall asleep. But I've seen the ending.
It is long. And it is painstakingly dry at points. So
yeah. They can't all be Unforgiven. That's the lesson.
Point of the story is the Western came, it dominated, then it went away. But then it came back again in 1992 with Unforgiven. And to kind of summarize what I was trying to say earlier, Clint Eastwood knows his audience and how he wants to present his films to his audience. And it's why he's been around for half of a century, longer than that, making movies that are popular. And he knows how to play the cards that he has very well. And this is probably the greatest case of that. Did he win Best Director again at any point? I know $1 Million Baby won Best Picture, but
Mystic River. I know Mystic River was Best Picture, so he might have gotten nominated for Best Director. But
all right, so director was Unforgiven, director Mystic River, good call, sir. Director $1 Million Baby, he won. Okay, so that would have been fuck off. That one director and picture. He got a director nomination for Letters from Iwo Jima, and American Sniper got a Best Picture nomination. So there you go.
Man, that movie's not good.
Yeah, neither is $1 Million Baby, and that was up against Sideways and Alexander Payne. So that makes me kind of frustrated.
$1 Million Baby is a masterpiece compared to American Sniper.
Being a good shot, being quick with a pistol, that don't do no harm, but it don't mean much next to being cool-headed. A man who will keep his head, not get rattled under fire. Like as not, he'll kill you.
All right. Unforgiven. Point of the story, it was a big deal for its time. And watching it in 2024, it's a good movie. It's, I can't say a fun time because there's some pretty just intense, like, moral battles waged, and it is violent and not like the fun kind of Friday the 13th violent. It's a very real depiction of violence.
That's the downside to the let's take the fun out of this approach. A big part of the plot is these men. In fact, what sets the plot in motion is these men abusing women. The entire movie, at least if you're someone like me, the entire movie, you're wondering, okay, when is another woman going to get abused? Because the movie already did it once, and they may do it again. It's established that there's a world where that kind of ugly shit happens. And so you're on pins and needles, and you don't know if Frances Fisher is going to make it all the way to the end, unscathed. Yeah. That stuff is, on one end, it's like, it's valid, right? Like, that's the world that you're portraying, and I should be uneasy because that serves the story, but it definitely makes it a harder watch. I like the story, I like the plot, but there's a lot of like ugliness in it.
Yeah, I don't think it wants to be a fun watch per se,
but it does have those weird moments of humor that sometimes makes you wonder, well, maybe I should be having fun.
Yeah, the guy peeing his pants was like, what are we doing?
Well, Freeman talking about masturbation with Eastwood, I was like, where did that come from? Like, I get it. And it was funny.
Cranking my rod the other day. Well, Julio, that begs the question. It won Best Picture, but what does it win from Julio Oliveira? Where are you rating this boy?
I know I've sounded more negative than I really am. And that's because the interesting part of the conversation for me was like trying to pinpoint why it's not 5 stars for me. We can praise Unforgiven, like all the good stuff for Unforgiven, and we did. But I feel like that is kind of common knowledge. And what like the fun part is questioning, okay, but why isn't it then as good as we think it could be? So I'm between 4 stars and 4.5. It really should be 4 because, I shouldn't give 4.5 to a movie that leaves me cold at the end. But man, there's a lot of stuff that's just awesome. Like I did get chills when Eastwood gave his well-known speech about killing a man.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, not even the big rant at the end, but when he's like,
"Oh, I'm sorry, you're talking about when he's on the hill with the kid."
Yeah, like to kill a man is a hell of a thing. I mean, that is because it's just such an honest, sincere, powerful thing to say, and so appropriate, at that point in the story. And then he says, "We all have it coming," and that's just good stuff. 4 stars. I'm gonna watch it again at some point in my life, and then maybe I'll get it. I'll be Clint Eastwood's age, and I'll be like, oh, that's really what was missing. I just need to be older to really get in the vibe of, that's another thing, another missed opportunity. Him being old doesn't really play all the way through. Because when the movie starts, you think that you're going to see this aging gunslinger have an adventure. But it's almost like he becomes young again by the end of the movie. I remember connecting to that part at the beginning when he's having trouble being who he used to be, right? Like it's been so long and he's out of practice. He can't even get on top of the horse. And I was like, oh, this is cool. It's a movie about getting old and not being at the top of your game anymore. But that's not really, by the movie's over. I was like, oh, no. He was a badass all along. So yeah, 4 stars.
I agree with you exactly. If I was giving star ratings, it would be 4 stars. For letter grade, it's going to be a B+. I think it's great. I think I'm going to agree with our boys Gene and Raj on the English Bob character. I think that is the singular thing I can point to in this movie of like, we didn't need this. Like the message could be sent by Gene Hackman another way. This character comes in and it gives us Bouchon and the duck of death and, all that shit. But you could tighten the movie up if you eliminate that subplot. And for someone who always bitches about runtime, I did not feel the runtime at this at all. I got through this in one sitting. It was fine. So it's not really an issue. I'm just like, fantasy booking in my head how you perfect this movie. And there was some kind of offbeat humor that was like, huh? But it's still a fantastic movie. Its legacy is very well deserved. And I'm glad we have now entered it into the halls of contrarian lore. So B+, 4 stars. That'll be my letterbox rating. So I agree with you completely. Great movie. Clint Eastwood, he may know what he's doing. I don't know about today just with his mental faculties, but he knew what he was doing behind the camera back in these days, back in 91.
This is before he yelled at an empty chair pretending it was Barack Obama.
Oh, man.
I've got Mr. Obama sitting here.
Whether you thought it was rambling and cringeworthy.
What do you want me to tell Romney? I can't tell him to do that. Can't do that to himself.
Or hilarious and brilliant.
I'm not going to shut up. It's my turn.
There is no denying it was the most talked about speech of either convention.
All right, that's Unforgiven. It's in the books. Anyone disagrees with us, we'll kill him. Find his wife, kill her too, burn their barn down, burn their house down. Julio, what's next?
Coming up next, how else to follow up a Clint Eastwood violent Western than with a celebrated Disney animated movie? We are going to absolutely pander to audiences and do an episode on Moana because the sequel is coming out pretty much the week after this episode drops, or maybe the week before. Whatever the case, we're doing Moana, the first one, because Moana 2 is coming out.
Man, there's a lot to talk about with Dwayne, too. So that's interesting time.
It's also, I just need to scratch this itch because I feel, and patrons, you probably, if you listen to our little recap of the last one for the cure, you heard me talk about this. I feel that the one time in our segment that I absolutely dropped the ball was when we had to do the Moana bit. And so I know I'm not going to be able to sleep until we right this wrong. And the best way to do it is by giving it a full episode where I can we're not doing it live. So if I fuck up, I can just go back and we can edit it, make it sound funnier. So that's it, Alex. We're going back to Disney. Not since we haven't done that since Aladdin, or since the live stream for The Cure. If you want to be more technical.
All right, so that's what's on deck next on our main feed. Julio, our friends over on Patreon, what can they expect?
On the Patreon feed this month, our bonus episode is on the movie Sing 'Em Again, something that we've been teasing, anticipating for months, maybe been over a year. I don't know. When was it that you watched Sing 'Em Returns?
Yeah, it's at least been a year.
All right. It's a long time coming. I mean, of course, we've watched other movies in the Sing 'Em universe since then, but this is it. We're going to go to theaters. The movie opens November 1st, which means that we already watched it by the time that you guys listen to this episode. But it's as we record this, it's in our future. We're going to go see it in theaters, and we're going to do a bonus for patrons. All patrons have access to that. On the QVR side, we're doing a dual QVR of the movie Alien versus Predator, not the first one, but the second one, Requiem, which, Alex, you haven't seen either, right?
No.
So are you going to watch the first one so you're ready for when we watch Requiem together, or are you just going to skip all the warm up and just go straight into the second one?
I'll probably commit. I'll probably watch the first one.
All right, cool. That's demanded, by the way, by patron John Amenta, which, John, we didn't shout you out. You are the reason we did Unforgiven. We watched Unforgiven because John Amenta from The Pint said, do Unforgiven. And he also said, please do a video on Alien versus Predator Requiem. So we're going to do that. And then, of course, we have Contrarians After Hours. Alex, what are you bringing to Contrarians After Hours this time?
Julio, I'll be discussing my recent physical media pulls. Sometimes when I'm buying a lot in succession, they just get stacked up before I put them, enter them into the shelf in the collection. I was looking at them the other day. I was like, man, I need to put these away. But first I should watch all these. And then I was like, oh, I'll talk about it. Because it's a mixture. It's a cosmic gumbo. There's VHS, DVD, Blu-ray,
Laserdisc.
Dude, don't even joke. I've regularly cited Rotten Tomatoes credited critic Kip Mooney and I had an exchange on Twitter or Facebook not too long ago about we've both literally had to stop ourselves from going down that path of starting to collect laser discs. I've looked at players and shit on eBay, and the problem is now they're kind of in vogue to collect, so players are a lot more expensive. 5 years ago you get one for $20, but so I still, whenever I'm at Half Price Books or a place that has a section, I will look through the laser discs to see, if something interesting just to have as a novelties in there. Two main things I look for. The original WrestleMania was released on Laserdisc. I talked about this on my LA trip. I had the chance to buy it for $100, but I couldn't figure out how I would get it home. So always on the hunt for the original WrestleMania on Laserdisc. And Bram Stoker's Dracula got a Criterion release only on Laserdisc. So always in the market for that. Neither of those are coming to the table, though. I'll be discussing the recent VHSs, DVDs, and Blu-rays that I picked up. One of which I rewatched, and it might be time to have an uncomfortable discussion retrospectively about a movie that we trashed contemporaneously.
Oh, like that we, you and I, or we as a society?
Both. So physical media abounds. Julio, what you got?
Mine is all streaming. In fact, one of them is a streaming release, an HBO Max original, and that is the latest adaptation of Stephen King's Salem's Lot. They released it just in time for Halloween, I guess. It's been adapted at least twice before that I know of, but this is the first time I've watched an adaptation. I've read the book, so I'll tell you about it. The one thing I'll tell you here is that the main guy, it stars, I don't remember his name, but it's Bill Pullman's son. And once you know it's Bill Pullman's son, you're like, oh, he looks just like Bill Pullman if he was younger. So Salem's Lot, and also I can't say that I completed the journey because there's one more movie, but fuck, I'm not going to watch. I watched Scream 3, which means that I filled in that gap. Now I've watched 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I don't care to watch anymore.
Amen.
But I needed to, I was skipping from 2 to 4, and that feels wrong. So
I had always forgotten you'd never seen 3. I hope I can say this and you agree as a teaser, the first Scream is better than Scream 3?
Well, I mean...
Oh no.
That's a great teaser, see? All right, so Salem's Lot 2024 edition, Scream 3, Alex's mountain of physical media that he went through. That's all on the After Hours. If any of what we just talked about, if any of that sounds interesting, go check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Contrarian Prime. Look at the tiers, see how you would like to join the Contrarian supplements. Now, Alex, let's get out of here.
Let's mount our horses and get out of here. Welcome to our end credits.
Or as we usually call them, our perennial plugs.
We start off by giving thanks to the Festive Years who provide our opening and closing tracks. They kick us off with Last Stand and take us home with Summer of 99. Be sure to head over to thefestiveyears.com for any and all Festive Years needs.
Our friend and fellow podcaster Hans Rothgieser is the man behind our logo and all the art you see related to our show. Reach out to him and let him know how much you like that little tomato. His email address is mildemonios@hotmail.com and his website is mildemonios.pe. That's MILDEMONIOS. Hans, thank you for all your support.
For those interested in the regularly absurd world of professional wrestling, Joe and the boys over at latenightgrin.com have you covered. Tell them the Contrarians sent you.
And we like to close with special thanks to our social media team of Zoe Perez and Coriari. Each of the social media accounts we mentioned in the introduction look as good as they do because of their work.
So that'll do it for this episode of The Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong, and we will catch you next time.
Just for old time's sake, I really don't care who you see and how much money he makes a year.